take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Thursday, July 21st, 2016, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the show, coming to you live and direct from beautiful legal Potland, Oregon, on the 26th floor of the Ardea Condominium Towers on the south waterfront of the Willamette River. Got a beautiful view here, got a bowl loaded up of legal Oregon cannabis, and we are ready to bring you the news for today. All sorts of great stuff coming up on the show today. We are going to play a replay interview, though, for our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment today. We interviewed Joe Baldy, a South San Francisco former police officer. We're going to replay that interview for you today because it was a really good one, and Joe's a really good guy, so I wanted to give him a chance to hear it again. But coming up at the end of the show, we'll have time for a radical rant, and this one sadly is tied to some breaking news having to do with some friends of the show. That would be Ann Armstrong and Alan Gordon, the leaders of the Healing Church in Rhode Island. They were arrested by Rhode Island State Police today for possession of a great deal of cannabis products, and so forth at their home, which they, of course, claim to use and distribute for religious purposes. And the cops didn't care too much about that and arrested them and are now holding them without bail. So in the Radical Rant today, we're going to talk about the fight for religious ganja sacrament and how, as noble as it is, folks, it's a wasted effort. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. Also coming up on the show today in Drug War Data Mining, we're going to take a look at the ridiculous marijuana testing thresholds in American sports. It's weird enough that we are testing our athletes for whether or not they smoke pot, but the variance in the testing thresholds throughout the different sports leaves a lot to be desired as well. We'll take a look at that in Drug War Data Mining. Also on the show today, in Behind the Headlines, we've got some more data to take a look at coming out of my home state here in Oregon. That is some bad news for those of us that want to fight for marijuana legalization coming up here in the 2016 election. I'm going to give you some talking points and some thoughts as we move forward on the issue of marijuana and driving, one of the two big issues that could still derail marijuana legalization. So we'll talk about that coming up right after the Cannabis Radio News. And in the headlines today, we are going to take you to that story in Rhode Island on the Cannabis Church. We've also got the retirement of an NFL player who speaks out for medical marijuana. We've got some good news coming out of Ireland with respect to medical marijuana. We're going to cover that data coming out of Oregon, and we take a look at Rochester, New York, where a candidate running for assembly says that the people she talks to want marijuana legalized, and some news, other sports news out of the Olympics for one particular judoka who will be competing in Rio. Also, we're going to take a look in hour two at Sheldon Adelson, who is the casino magnate who is bankrolling a lot of the anti-marijuana propaganda that happened in 2014 and is likely to rear his ugly head in 2016. In fact, you know what, folks? I'm going to call an audible. That's right. I'm going to switch things up right here, right live on the show. We're going to can the pre-recorded interview, and let's go to the Sheldon Adelson piece for hour one. We'll put the Leap interview into hour two because we did hear it last week. So stay tuned. Hour one is all new. See? We're adjusting on the fly because we're live. I don't know why I'm getting that hard drive static. I'll see what I can do to fix it during the break. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back after this.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Next to THC and CBD, you can now add CBR to your cannabis vernacular. CBR as in cannabisradio.com.
The next generation of vaporizers has arrived. Vuber vaporizers are blazing the way with unparalleled technology for oil, concentrate, or dry flower pens. Providing unsurpassed customer service and expert craftsmanship, Vuber vaporizers use cutting-edge technology, providing a power-packed, smoother vapor with a lifetime guarantee. Experience vaporizing the way it was meant to be. The Vuber way.
Growing green to generate more green.
Hello to all you happy herbalizers, smiling trippy hippies, and everyone who believes in freedom and tolerance. This is The Grow Show, and I'm Kyle Cushman.
From food to fuel, from remedy to resource.
Welcome my guest, Ed Rosenthal, the guru of ganja. Let me ask you, right now I hear your lighter clicking. Are you smoking indoor or are you smoking sun-grown?
What am I smoking? I'm smoking concentrate.
Way to get out of the answer there. So you're truly like the king, right? You just clap your hands and somebody brings you a bowl and you're all set, right?
I wish that were the case.
The Grow Show with Kyle Cushman, only on CannabisRadio.com.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere. Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, SoundCloud, Snapchat, LinkedIn, and Boise State University's 2400 baud modem bulletin board system from 1985.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News. Covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at cannabisradio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Thursday, July 21st, 2016. West Greenwich, Rhode Island. 2 leaders of a cannabis-focused religion were arrested by Rhode Island State Police for cultivation and possession of marijuana. Ann Armstrong and Alan Gordon are leaders of the Healing Church, a religion that promotes the use of cannabis as the cannabosum referred to in the Bible's recipe for holy anointing oil. The pair made headlines in 2015 when they attempted to smoke sacramental cannabis in Rhode Island's Roger Williams Memorial, a site recognizing religious freedom. State police say they recovered 12 pounds of usable marijuana, 59 cannabis plants, and 10 pounds of hash oil from the pair's home. While Armstrong and Gordon cite the Constitution's First Amendment and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993 as protecting their right to use cannabis sacramentally, just as it protects other religions' use of hallucinogenics like peyote and ayahuasca, numerous court decisions have found in favor of the government's compelling interest to maintain cannabis prohibition, including a decision last month by the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in the marijuana distribution case of Roger Christie of the Hawaii Cannabis Ministry. Baltimore, Maryland. Eugene Monroe, the NFL offensive tackle who was dropped by the Baltimore Ravens following his call for medical marijuana acceptance in the sport, has retired from football. The 7-year veteran cited his health and his family in making his decision, from his wife being, quote, concerned about things like me putting the phone in the freezer and then tearing up our house looking for it, end quote, to his 4-year-old daughter telling him, quote, Daddy, you don't remember anything, end quote. Monroe says he will still be a, quote, vocal advocate for medical marijuana research, particularly as it relates to CTE, end quote, the brain-damaging disease seemingly caused by repeated concussions. Monroe also says he won't rest until, quote, steps are taken to curb the overuse of opioids in NFL locker rooms, end quote. Dublin, Ireland.
A lawmaker in the lower house of Parliament has introduced a bill to legalize medical marijuana in Ireland. Deputy Brid Smith met with caregivers for people with Dravet syndrome, the rare childhood epilepsy that moved many U.S. states into passing CBD-only legislation. Smith, however, also supports the use of whole plant cannabis for alleviation of seizures, spasms, nausea, and pain. Gresham, Oregon. The Oregon State Police have reported to Portland's Fox TV affiliate that there has been a 163% increase in stone driving arrests in the first 6 months of marijuana legalization. Overall, DUI arrests increased by 7%, suggesting that marijuana is not being substituted for the use of alcohol when it comes to driving impairment factors. Oregon State traffic data for 2014 also show an increase in the overall driving fatality rate by over 10%. However, critics note that following the passage of marijuana legalization, police are prioritizing the detection of marijuana-impaired drivers and are increasing their own education on how to spot such drivers. Driving fatalities, they counter, are influenced by alcohol DUIs, which increased, as well as lower gas prices, leading to more miles traveled. Rochester, New York. A candidate for state assembly is calling for the legalization of marijuana in New York by noting that many of the citizens she visits are smoking it. Rachel Barnhart, running in the 138th district, told Wham TV that while campaigning door to door, quote, "I meet many people who are smoking marijuana. I know what's going on in their houses because I can smell it," end quote. Barnhart faces an uphill battle if she wins her election to an assembly that barely managed to pass medical marijuana in New York, and then only in a non-smokable form in a very restricted program. About half of Rochester area residents surveyed agreed with legalization, but current Assemblyman for the 138th District, Harry Bronson, said that, quote, "The constituents I represent have not been calling for legalization, so I am not prepared to start advocating for that," end quote. Westfield, New Jersey. An American judoka who was expelled from the 2012 Olympic team for failing a marijuana drug test will be back competing in judo at the 2016 Olympics in Rio. Nicholas Del Popolo claims he had eaten a brownie at a friend's party and did not know he was infused with cannabis. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Thursday, July 21st, 2016. I'm Russ Belville.
Keep your cannabis cravings under control. Feed your mind with CannabisRadio.com.
Play as Ted Growing, expelled botany sophomore and the biggest grower in town, only on Weed Firm Replanted. Available on the App Store and Google Play.
It's a lot of work being the biggest grower in town. Maintaining a room full of plants while dealing with a slew of eccentric customers? From a hardcore partier to the curious neighbor next door.
Is anybody home?
Help me expand my bud business by unlocking new strains, customizing my grow room, and completing challenges that you can't get enough of. Grow your empire so big you can see it from space. Low on funds? Don't worry. Weed Firm Replanted is free to download.
Download Weed Firm Replanted for free on the App Store and Google Play today. Get growing, Mr. Growing.
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks are far less than those posed by legal drugs.
You're listening to Radical Russ on the Russ Belville Show.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Today in the Cannabis Focus, we're going to take a look at some of those numbers from the Oregon State Police that we talked about in the Cannabis Radio News. Very disturbing figures coming here. According to the report, there has been a 163% increase in the number of marijuana DUIs issued by the state police in the first 6 months of legalization. Now, that would be the second half of 2015. So we're talking about, it became legal to possess in July of last year, and then they got the first 6 months of data. And this is troublesome, but I think it is something that we can defend against. And what we need to do is to make sure everybody understands one simple analogy. I always like to say it like this. If you go to the river one day and you catch 2 fish, and then you go to the river the next day and you catch 20 fish, does it mean there was more fish in the river? Or could it be that you found a new place to fish, you found a better fishing hole, you used better bait, or you changed from a fishing pole to a fishing net? This is what we're going to have to do with respect to these DUI numbers, because I can tell you that when California passes and these other states pass, following their passage, they are also going to see increases in the number of people caught for marijuana DUI. And our opponents are going to seize on that and try to scare the rest of the states by saying, see, you legalize marijuana and more people are stoned drivers. We need to emphasize the point that we're not necessarily catching more stoned drivers out there, that there's not necessarily more of them, that we're just better at catching them now. We can emphasize that through passing marijuana legalization, we make the police aware of the idea of there being stoned drivers out there. And these laws, when they're passed, often divert some of those marijuana tax funds to law enforcement and specifically mandate the training of more drug recognition experts. In other words, the cops are out there, they're abandoning the fishing pole and they're changing to the net. They're better at spotting the people who are stoned drivers. If we can get this through people's heads, we could start to change the framing of this so that when more stoned drivers are apprehended or charged, the public starts to see that as actually a benefit of legalization. That now legalization is helping us to catch the people out there who are stoned drivers. Now, it's important that we emphasize that when we say stoned drivers on this show, that we're talking about people who are actually impaired and causing a problem. For the cops to be pulling them over in the first place, they need to have some sort of belief that they're impaired in some sort of way. But let's not confuse this with the per se DUIs that are based on nanograms of metabolite in someone's urine or blood, or active metabolite in their blood that have nothing to do with impairment. So for the purpose of this discussion, let's leave it to the people that we do want to keep off the road, people who are too impaired by marijuana to be driving. I personally don't think that's a whole lot of people. And it's become a difficult distinction to have to make because to the public, they just want to see that there's no more harm coming to them from marijuana legalization. So again, changing this frame to the idea of the cops now have a net rather than a fishing pole will help the public to understand that more DUI arrests does not mean that we have more dangerous roads out there. In fact, it means we have less dangerous roads out there because we're catching more of the people who you would think would be a problem. I don't think they're a problem personally, again, but again, we're talking about the perceptions of the people out there. The only problem with this becomes in trying to back it up. Now, up to this point, when this has been raised for Washington or Colorado, I've been able to go to the statistics and show that, yeah, you may have arrested more people for DUI, but the traffic fatalities continue to go down. Unfortunately, with Oregon, in the first in the 2014 data, the traffic fatalities went up in Oregon slightly. And that's not just overall fatalities, but also the fatality rate per 100 million miles driven, which would account for the more miles being driven because gas prices have been lower and therefore more chance for people to die. Now, the rate went up, so that takes that into account. We don't yet have these numbers from 2015 to see what the effect of marijuana legalization may have been, but the numbers from 2013, 2012, and before that all showed a consistent decline. 2014 was the first year in Oregon where there was an increase in those traffic fatality rates. If that increase continues through 2015, that could be tougher to defend.
Hey, bud, let's party.
I'm just saying we need to be careful. Please, drive carefully, drive safely, and don't take legalization as some sort of license to just be token and driving and not worrying about it. This isn't a done deal yet. We need to get legalization passed in a whole lot of places. Let's put our best foot forward and be the good tokers that we are. I know you will.
From dabs to chivas, sativas to indicas, we roll out a whole concentrate of fresh new content every week. It's like going from the greenhouse to the dispensary. CannabisRadio.com.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
Tommy Chong is ready to cut through the smoke and change the tone of Tilk Radio.
Hope everybody's got their vape pen handy, or their pipe, or their bong, or whatever you use to do your medicine.
But you don't. It's not a requirement. You don't have to be high for this show.
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
I don't know who you're talking to. You have to be high to do anything. At least I do. I don't know about you. In fact, I've been high so long that being straight is another high.
The Tommy Chong Podcast, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome to my world.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
I beat China all the time.
Okay, maybe you're high, too.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Today in Drug War Data Mining, I want to talk about drug testing in sports. We've got the Olympics coming up in Rio, and in the news, we had two sports stories today. One of Olympic judoka Nick Del Popolo, and the story of Eugene Monroe retiring from the NFL. And both of them have marijuana in their backgrounds. Eugene Monroe advocating for medical cannabis research and acceptance for treatment of CTE and concussion. And, of course, Del Popolo was rejected from the 2012 Olympic team because he failed a marijuana drug test. And that leads me to discussing the thresholds that make a failure for a drug test for marijuana in the various sports disciplines. It's really strange, first of all, that any of the sports would be testing for marijuana use in the first place. None of them claim it to be a performance-enhancing drug, although you can talk to many athletes who talk about it being useful for their rest and recovery, and even a few who say that it helps them with respect to timing and concentration. So that could happen in the future. Who knows? Once we know more about cannabis and its effect on sport, maybe someday it will be a performance-enhancing drug. But for now, it is just banned because it's on the banned substances list, largely because it's illegal and culturally unaccepted. But the leagues, like I say, all have different levels at which they consider someone to be positive. All the way at the lowest level, the easiest drug test to fail for marijuana in all of the sports disciplines is with the NCAA. The NCAA, of course, controls all Division I college athletics, and this would refer a lot, of course, to the college football players who pop up all the time as failing the marijuana drug test. They need just 5 nanograms of inactive metabolite in urine to fail the marijuana drug test. 5 nanograms. Now, that's not the 5 nanograms like they have in Washington State, where it's where they're talking about the active THC in the blood, the impairing THC. This is metabolite. This is something that shows that the impairing effect has worn off. It's been metabolized. And 5 nanograms is a level that someone who's even an infrequent cannabis consumer could test positive at days or even a week or two after consumption. Now, at the next level up, at 15 nanograms, we have and the 15 nanograms used to be the NCAA's threshold, by the way. They lowered it to 5 nanograms in 2014. 15 nanograms seems to be the threshold for the National Basketball Association, but their testing is so, shall we say, unrandom that they have plenty of time to prepare for it, and we don't see as much news about NBA and marijuana. From 15 nanograms at the NBA, we move up to 35 nanograms with the NFL, who raised that limit from 15 recently, within the past 2 or 3 years. And yet still, we have numerous football players who are suspended. In 2013, Von Miller, the NFL's Super Bowl MVP this year, he was suspended 6 games. Josh Gordon, who in 2014 was going to be the leading receiver up to that point, he was suspended 10 games. And these guys lose their game paychecks for each one of those games they miss. So this is costing them tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. 35 nanograms in the NFL. Major League Baseball maintains a standard of 50 nanograms for failing a baseball test, a marijuana test for baseball, the highest limit, aside from the Nevada State Athletic Commission and the World Anti-Doping Agency. Now, the Nevada Commission and many other state commissions have raised their limit from 50 nanograms. Nevada State Athletic Commission raised from 50 nanograms to 150 nanograms, and the World Anti-Doping Agency raised theirs from 15 to 150 nanograms. Both agencies mention this. The World Anti-Doping Agency, they control the Olympic sports and international sports, and the Nevada State Athletic Commission, these other state commissions, control boxing and mixed martial arts. They all raise their standard to 150 nanograms for the express purpose of ensuring that they don't catch people who are just using cannabis on their off time and not getting into the ring or the cage high. And then there's the NHL. The National Hockey League stands alone as the only pro sport that I could find that does not test for marijuana, does not have a test for marijuana in their bargaining agreement, which is great news for the hockey players who, like football players, boxers, and mixed martial artists, can often suffer from head trauma, from concussion, and who knows, even chronic traumatic encephalopathy. We shall see. The difference in all of these drug testing limits just further underscores how much education is necessary to make these sports leagues understand that testing for marijuana is not helping to improve their sport. It's harming their athletes by preventing them from acquiring a safer method of pain killing. It's preventing them from the benefits against head trauma. And for these athletes, it's costing them money and prestige in their careers for no good reason. Let's end the sports leagues testing for marijuana metabolites as we continue to legalize and medical marijuana. medicalize marijuana all across this country, it's just an untenable position. All right, when we come back, we're going to have our activist agenda. I'm going to tell you all about Sheldon Adelson, the billionaire buzz killer, when we return.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Legal to listen to all over the world. We're just not sure about France. CannabisRadio.com.
Hi, I'm Montel Williams. Most of you know me as a talk show host, but I'm also an author, actor, single father of 4, avid snowboarder, and I'm also a medical marijuana patient. Living with multiple sclerosis, I'm in pain every day. Medical marijuana is my last resort, and it helps me when all other drugs have failed. If you'd like more information about medical marijuana, you can contact the Marijuana Policy Project at mpp.org or call 1-877-JOIN-MPP.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
The Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment.
Okay, maybe you're high too.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Back in 2014, Floridians were fixing to become the first southern state with medical marijuana. Activists put together a professional campaign. It was funded mostly by millionaire attorney John Morgan. Florida resident Kathy Jordan, one of the world's longest surviving patients with Lou Gehrig's disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, right? Kathy Jordan emerged as the public example of who would be helped by passing the Question to Medical Marijuana Amendment. And the polls showed landslide support ranging in the 70 to 80% range, which is good news because the constitutional amendments in Florida, for some reason, require 60% of the vote to pass. Yeah, 60% vote requirement. So at that time, 2014, we're riding pretty high. We're thinking, here we go. We're gonna put an anchor in Florida there and get medical marijuana spread throughout the South. Well, then you enter Sheldon Adelson, who poured $4 million of his money into this sleazy anti-medical marijuana TV ad campaign. He was solicited to get involved in Florida by his longtime friend, a guy by the name of Mel Sembler. Now, Mel and Betty Sembler, they are longtime anti-drug crusaders who once ran something called Straight Inc. And Straight Inc. were these tough love rehab camps for teenagers.
right? And they were found guilty in numerous lawsuits and had to pay almost $1 million in damages over false imprisonment and abuse claims by the kids who were treated in these tough love camps. And some bad stuff. Look up Straight Ink sometime and get yourself educated on that. It's some wicked stuff. Well, in these TV ads that Adelson pumped $4 million into, they told Floridians that the Question 2 medical marijuana amendment from 2014 was full of loopholes, that it's somehow going to empower drug dealers, that anybody would be able to get medical marijuana. It'd be a free-for-all like California, and it would turn all the kids into drug addicts. Now, these ads were successful enough to drop the final electoral count for Question 2 down to 58%. Now, that's a landslide win anywhere else, but again, a 2-point defeat for Florida. So, for years now, those of us who've been trying to legalize marijuana, we've been funded primarily by 3 billionaires. Financier George Soros, Peter Lewis from Progressive Insurance, and the University of Phoenix founder John Sperling. And today, California's legalization campaign is primarily funded by Lewis's estate and Facebook billionaire Sean Parker. Now, our opposition has its first billionaire backer, Sheldon Adelson. Adelson is an 82-year-old man who is currently Forbes' 22nd richest person in the world. He's estimated to be worth $27 billion. He's a self-made man, too. Started with nothing, grew up poor, got like a $100 loans from his uncle so he could start selling newspapers on the corner, and then made money from that and got another loan to build another business. He's one of these guys, just took it from the very ground level. He helped found Comdex, the computer stock index, and sold that and made a ton of change. Well, now his money comes from his Las Vegas Sands casino empire. They own and operate the Venetian, the Palazzo, and the Sands Convention Center in Las Vegas. They operate the Sands Casino in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and 5 more casinos in China, Macau, and 4 in Macau and 1 in Singapore, I think it is. And of course, this guy is very active in Republican politics. It's kind of odd too, because socially he holds a lot of liberal positions. He's pro-choice, he's pro-gay rights, for example, but lately he's been a Republican darling. His influence is so great in GOP circles that the candidates flew to Vegas this year to personally lobby for his support. The pundits called it the Adelson primary, right? Well, Adelson, by the way, has endorsed Donald Trump for president and has pledged to donate $100 million to the Trump campaign. $100 million. Maybe he could also educate Trump on how not to bankrupt a casino. How do you do that? Anyway, while Adelson has these strong political views, some progressive views, like I said, on women's rights and gay rights, but he's also got some conservative views on taxes and foreign policy, and particularly with respect to Israel. But one thing that Sheldon Adelson really hates is marijuana. See, Sheldon and his second wife, and she's born in Israel. Her name is Dr. Miriam Adelson. They've been married for 25 years, and they've got 4 kids together. She's got numerous medical degrees, and her specialty? Drug addiction treatment. That's right. Adelson is married to Big Rehab. So she and Sheldon founded the Adelson Clinic, which treats people for addiction. They've got 2 centers, one in Las Vegas and one in Tel Aviv. Those clinics arose out of the two's shared interest in combating drug addiction. Obviously, Miriam Adelson, that's her gig, that's her job, that's her degree, fighting drug addiction. But with Sheldon, he and his first wife had 3 adopted kids together. One of those kids, Mitchell,
used heroin and cocaine from an early age, according to Miriam, and died of an overdose in 2005. Another one of those adopted kids, Gary, was estranged from the Adelsons for years due to his drug addiction. So, Sheldon Adelson is married to Big Rehab and has 2 kids that had hard drug addiction problems. Now we're starting to see some of his focus as to why he wants to throw his millions of dollars against legalizing marijuana. And this is odd, too. This is really odd because the Adelsons formed the Adelson Medical Research Foundation. And in that 2014 campaign for medical marijuana in Florida, the Tampa Bay Times reported that researchers from the Adelson Center for the Biology of Addictive Diseases at Tel Aviv University found, quote, some of the chemical compounds found in marijuana can help treat multiple sclerosis-like diseases in mice, end quote. Adelson's own Israeli research center discovered medical benefit for cannabis in the treatment of multiple sclerosis. I'd tell you to go look it up, but all the links from every source I could find that referenced the Tampa Bay Times story that pointed back to the original study are 404s, man. Page not found. I tried looking in the scholar libraries to find the study itself. Couldn't find it. I can find reporting on the study. Can't find the actual study itself. Interesting, huh? So despite Adelson's own medical marijuana research foundation, or own research foundation, finding that medical marijuana is beneficial in treating MS, and despite his wife being a medically educated person in the nation that discovered THC and leads the world in medical marijuana research, that doesn't matter. As far as Sheldon Adelson's concerned, marijuana is the gateway drug that led his adopted son to his death from hard drugs. So now, Florida has medical marijuana on the ballot again as question 2, and legalization is on the ballot in Adelson's home state of Nevada, also as question 2. But the billionaire buzzkiller isn't just dropping 7-figure donations on media ads to defeat marijuana reform. He's buying the media itself. The largest newspaper in Nevada is the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Back in 2014, when the campaign to regulate marijuana like alcohol in Nevada was beginning its signature drive, the editorial board endorsed the measure, and they wrote, quote, taxpayers finally seem to understand that spending vast sums of money at the local, state, and federal levels on police, prosecutors, public defenders, judges, and jails to lock up nonviolent offenders and enable the enrichment of gangs and thugs has done nothing to diminish demand for marijuana, end quote. Well, so Sheldon Adelson, in December of 2015, shelled out $140 billion to buy the Las Vegas Review-Journal. In June, the editorial board reversed itself on the support for the Nevada legalization initiative. They wrote, quote, legalizing weed would jeopardize the health of countless Nevadans, expose more people to drug abuse and addiction, and put excessive stress on states' healthcare facilities and do little to relieve the state's bloated prison population. So, $140 million buys the newspaper, gets them to switch their view on legalization. Now, whether or not Adelson's going to spend his money anywhere else but Florida and Nevada, that's anybody's guess. We got potentially 10 states voting on reform this fall, but as rich as Adelson is, he could drop $4 million in each of those states and give Donald Trump his $100 million for the price he paid for the Review-Journal. This guy's willing to drop $140 million to buy a newspaper, a dying industry. How much is he willing to put into fighting marijuana legalization? We shall see.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Being green is good. Growing green is good. Making green is great. CannabisRadio.com. Cash?
Sorry.
I don't carry around cash, and I don't want to use the ATM and pay surcharges.
You don't need to carry cash. Haven't you heard about PayQuick?
Okay, tell me about PayQuick.
It's the safe and easy way to pay. It works just like your debit card to securely pay for your purchase, and it gives you rewards point every time you use it.
Nice.
PayQuick, the safe and easy way to pay. PayQuick.com.
Tommy Chong Show on Cannabis Radio. You know, about this podcast, what I really want to do from now on is to solve world problems. I feel like my job is to calm everybody down and focus on how we can save this planet.
The Tommy Chong Podcast, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome to my world.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Each year on my birthday, every American gets a cupcake.
Okay, maybe you're high, too.
With over 6 years of experience in the industry, New Era CPAs is one of the nation's leading cannabis accounting firms, helping hundreds of growers, dispensaries, and ancillary companies with their tax, legal, and business strategies. New Era CPA's offices cover the West Coast from Seattle to San Diego, and their skilled team is always available to help you take your business to the next level. Visit neweracpas.com for more info and set up a consultation. Welcome to the New Era.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Well, as I mentioned in the news today, Ann Armstrong and Alan Gordon have been arrested by the Rhode Island State Police for an alleged cannabis grow site with numerous plants and pounds of usable cannabis and hash oil seized that they claim as their religious right, that they are members of the Healing Church. Get it? THC, the Healing Church. They're members of the Healing Church that believes the use of cannabis is a sacrament, that it's called for in the Bible, that the Hebrew word kane bosum refers to cannabis, the fragrant cane that was to be used in the anointing oil by the rabbis of the Old Testament, of course, then used by Jesus Christ, yada, yada, yada. It's their religious right. And this is based, their argument is based on the First Amendment to the Constitution, that the government shall not infringe on the practice of religion, and the 1993 Religious Freedom Restoration Act, signed by President Clinton. This act was passed with respect to these Native Americans. A couple of different cases. There was a Brazilian case, a UDV, something vegetal, basically a Brazilian native church, that were using ayahuasca tea for their ceremonies. And ayahuasca is a potent hallucinogen, and it's a Schedule I drug. And they argued that it was their religious right to use this ayahuasca tea. And also there have been decisions about Native Americans and their use of peyote, another potent hallucinogen that's a Schedule I drug. And so the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was passed by Congress and signed by President Clinton, and it basically said that unless the government had a really damn good reason, that people's use of these substances for religious purposes should be respected. And so that's where Ann Armstrong and Alan Gordon and others, people like Roger Christie and New Jersey weed man Ed Forshin, rest their case. And it's not an illogical case from their point of view, and even from my point of view. The idea that, hey, if you're going to let people use
some really heavy-duty, mind-tripping Schedule I drugs for religious purposes. Can't you let him use a really mildly head-tripping drug for Schedule I purposes? Right? Ayahuasca and peyote, man, that's like don't make any plans type of drugs, right? That's like heavy-duty stuff. And so why in the world would you want to prevent people from using cannabis, which, might get them a little giggly, might get the munchies, but nothing like peyote or ayahuasca? Well, it's because of the damn good reason part, which is in law speak, the government's compelling interest. And there are a few tests that are done on this, legal tests that are set by precedent in previous cases. One of them is called the Lemon test, named after Mr. Lemon, one of the people in the case. And another one is the Sherbet test, named after another one of the plaintiffs in another case. And so you have the Lemon test and the Sherbet test, which, yum, sounds good. But these legal tests basically amount to how the government evaluates your case when it comes to your religious freedom claim. And it's a balancing test, right? On the one hand, we want to let people practice their religion without interference. On the other hand, the government has a compelling interest to uphold the law. And in the case of the Controlled Substances Act, what we're talking about is the government's compelling interest to uphold bans on Schedule I drugs versus the right of these churches to ingest their sacraments, to practice their religion. And there becomes all of these great little terms like least restrictive means. Is it the least restrictive way the government could, enforce the law? And that comes into play too. And it gets pretty hairy, but the long and short of it is this. When it comes to the peyote and the ayahuasca, the government's got a compelling interest to keep those things illegal. But letting a few Indians use these things once or twice a year to take these massive trips isn't going to stop the government from banning that drug. The idea being that the ayahuasca and the peyote are somewhat self-limiting. It's not the kind of thing you do every day. And these religions are these old religions that can trace, generation after generation of ceremonial use. They've got a whole shamanistic rite and ritual that goes with these things. And you can pretty well identify who the religious practitioners are, right? Registered native tribes and native Brazilians and so forth. So it's not going to be hard to identify who are those guys using those hallucinogens for religious purposes versus who's these, white hipsters that found some ayahuasca and are just tripping balls for the fun of it. They'll still be able to bust those guys. They won't have to bust the natives. So when it came to the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that went in the favor of those powerful drugs. In a sense, those drugs were so powerful and so limiting by their power that they were able to, fit under those, they could clear those bars, basically. But when it comes to cannabis, here's the problem. Number one, a lot of these religions that are suing for these are new religions, new made-up religions. The Healing Church, the Hawaiian Cannabis Ministry, another THC church, right? I don't know what Ed's calling his in New Jersey, the Temple or whatever. But they're new, okay? So you start with a deficit of trust from the courts and this idea that it's, for any other reason but getting away with something, getting away with smoking pot. And then you follow that up with the fact that cannabis, by its nature, is the kind of drug that you can take on a regular basis, on a daily basis, multiple times a day. You can be habituated to it. And a lot of these churches, when it comes to their use of it, support that kind of use, which kind of takes away from the ritual and the whole shamanistic rites and everything that goes along with the case for the ayahuasca and the peyote guys.
the THC people are saying, hey, yeah, pot needs to be a part of your daily life. You can smoke it anytime you like. Kind of takes the religious part out of it for the judges and for the law. Okay. So basically what we end up with is a problem that if we allowed the Healing Church and the Hawaiian Cannabis Ministry and these, let's just say it, white folks to start pot churches, not Ed Fortune, obviously, but, just folks to start pot churches, then anybody could start a pot church and everybody could be in the pot church. And then the government's compelling interest to stop people who want to smoke pot from doing so for fun could not be fulfilled. In essence, cannabis suffers from being too mild and too popular. If we let people use it religiously, everybody would, is the government's argument. And that is what's been found in case after case. It just came down from the Ninth Circuit last month against Roger Christie. That same idea. And if these, and sometimes in rebuttal to this, I'll have people that'll send me these case of so-and-so who got off or case of so-and-so who got off. And almost always those cases are someone who had like a personal amount on them. They just had a personal, a bowl, an eighth or whatever. And so they didn't get off. They didn't get the, they weren't acquitted so much as the charges weren't filed because it was a pity amount and who cares, who wants to do that. But in these cases, we're talking Roger Christie, we're talking Ann Armstrong and Alan Gordon. We're talking about people that have pounds of usable marijuana and pounds of hash oil and multiple plants. So that gets into the realm of distribution and trafficking, which further takes away from that defense for the religious freedom use. Because when it comes to ayahuasca and peyote, there's not a huge market in it. There's not, you can go and find it and buy it, but it's not like a big market. Again, because cannabis is so popular, there is a huge established market for it. And then it becomes indistinguishable from, well, are you growing 70 plants to give to people in the church, or are you growing 70 plants to sell on the black market? Or what's the difference if people are coming to your church and giving you donations? And that's where that whole government compelling interest comes in and weighs the scale against the religious use of cannabis. Now, every time I make this point, and I've made it numerous times on the show, I'll get responses back and angry emails and so forth. Understand that I am not agreeing with the government on this. I don't agree. But I also think that fighting for religious use is a waste of effort and a bit snobby. It's a waste of effort in that time after time after time we've seen that the compelling interest argument can't be beaten because cannabis is too popular. So you keep barking up the wrong tree. But the other part of it is that it seems exclusionary to me. Why should I have to come up with some sort of story about some sort of God that has some sort of plan for me to smoke pot? It's the same problem I have with medical marijuana. And that is by making the medical marijuana argument or making the religious use argument, you are ceding the point to the opponent that there needs to be some third-party arbitration as to whether or not I have the right to use cannabis. I don't need a king, a court, a cleric, or a clerk to tell me whether or not I can use cannabis. Anyway, that's my thought on the religious use argument. We'll talk a little bit more about that in hour 2. Also, we'll take a look around the net for the latest breaking news on marijuana, cannabis, hemp, ganja, herb, weed, muggles, tea, jive, whatever you like to call it. We're all about it right here on the Russ Belville Show. Woohoo! That's all the time for hour 1, and hour 2's coming up next. Thanks for being here. For everyone here at CannabisRadio.com, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it.